Now then, tonight sees the start of our series of special reports here on London Tonight, marking the abolition of the slave trade. This coming weekend is the 200th anniversary of the law that banned the sale of African slaves throughout the British Empire.
Now, what many Londoners might not realise is just how much of our city's prosperity was based on that trade and the impact it still has today. So we'll be focusing on slavery's history in the capital, its politics, and we'll meet the families who can trace their slave roots. But the series begins this evening as Ronke Phillips reports from a replica slave ship designed to show how thousands were transported into bondage 200 years on.
A scene from Amistad, a film widely considered to be one of the most accurate portrayals of the horrors of the slave industry, and London is where the UK trade in human cargo began. By the 18th century, 1 in every 4 ships which left a UK dock was a slave trading ship, and this is a replica of what was then known as a square rigger. It would have been full of nothing but human cargo.
The ships went out of London and out of Liverpool and Bristol down to the west coast of Africa, carrying manufactured goods, and there they loaded. They filled them up with Africans and took them as slaves across the Atlantic, and then from the Atlantic they would come back to England.
In 10 days' time, this visual reminder of the slave trade will dock at Tower Pier. It'll be renamed Zong after the notorious ship which was involved in the brutal treatment and murder of slaves as part of an insurance scam.
It was a ship just like this, and it should not have had more than 250 to 300 slaves on board, but they put 442 slaves on board. As they neared Jamaica, most of the slaves were skin and bone, and he knew that he wasn't going to get a very good price on the slave market, and so he decided to throw overboard 133 slaves in order to claim the insurance.
These square riggers were also known as loose packers or even tight packers, and that's because the slaves were all laid side by side. They were packed in so tightly it was almost as though they were laying inside a coffin.
And they were so packed together, and of course they were manacled as well. This is a full body treatment, and this would go round the neck of the slave and then fastened this way and down to the wrists here, and this goes down around the legs here. Of course, with these they could beat them as well, and really things that really don't.
That anyone could survive a day.
Isn't it awful? Yes, that's right.
With
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's just awful.
Slave ships carried the stench of decay and disease. The death toll for these ships was absolutely staggering. Around 2.5 million slaves died during the 18th century. That means for every 1,000 slaves transported, 200 didn't make it alive. And it's disturbing historical facts like this which will form a major part of the exhibition.
Very few people know anything about slavery. It's a period in our history that we just haven't talked about. So it's sort of blotted out of our memory, but we need to understand what has gone on.
A visit to the Zong is not just educational, it's moving and sometimes upsetting. And for those who've organised this event, funded it out of their own pockets, it's a legacy which deserves more than an apology.
What we really need to see is deeds and not words. And if we're really going to deal with the legacy of racism and attitudes, we've got to deal with it with meaningful policies, not just simple words.
The replica slave ship will dock at Tower Pier on March the 29th. Ronke Phillips, London Tonight.
Extraordinary stuff there. And we'd like to know what your views are, how you feel on this 200th anniversary of the end of the slave trade. Have you traced your family back to those terrible times on either side of the divide?
Yes, did you know anything about it at all, in fact? It's not one of those subjects which comes up very often, is it? Particularly with reference to London. We'd like to hear your views on this. The details you need to get in touch are on the screen now, and we'll share your thoughts later on in the programme.